What is your philosophy of life? Today we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to bring up an argument that Professor A.C. Grayling makes in this book, Philosophy and Life. Now this book he describes it as an answer to the recent revival of interest in ancient schools of thought. It centers around the Socratic question, which is, what kind of life should I lead? What values should I have? And what should I aim for? And it's called the Socratic question because it was Socrates who was the first person, at least in Western recorded philosophical history, who systematically asked this question in search for reasoned answers. The argument that he makes in this book is that we all have a philosophy of life, whether we know it or not. In fact, most of the time, we definitely don't know that we have one, but we definitely do. And it is the one we've adopted from society. But what is a philosophy of life, first of all? Well, it describes your approach to life, the thinking behind the decisions you make, your values, the hierarchy of your values. He describes it as the thinking behind the way you live, the decisions you make, the hierarchy of your values, and the goals you decide to pursue. We all have that thinking. But where did it come from? Well, if you didn't consciously decide it, you adopted it from the society you were socialized into. This is very natural. But it is also problematic, which he points out in this book. It looks something like this. You get an education, then you get a job. Then you get a house. You marry. You have a family. You pay into a retirement fund. You go on annual holidays. And eventually you retire. And you travel around for a bit. Then you go into a retirement home and you die. That's kind of the blueprint of the life path of the mainstream life philosophy. That's kind of what is prescribed to us all. But it's problematic for a variety of reasons. The biggest reason, though, is that it is problematic to unreflectively and without thinking adopt and go along with this life philosophy like it is the be-all and end-all and what we should do for our own lives. You see, the thing is, one size does not fit all. While there are valid cultural stereotypes and valid generalizations that we can make about peoples, including our own people, we at the same time can recognize how different we are to the person next to us, how different we are to even our siblings. It is obvious to us our own uniqueness, yet we are funneled down along the same life path as everyone else. The mainstream life philosophy is a one-size-fits-all thing, and that absolutely does not take into account the uniqueness inherent in all of us. It fits us like a badly sized shoe. And for this reason, it is definitely not something that we should opt into unthinkingly. And what we actually need is a variation of an off-the-beaten-track life philosophy. Because the well-worn and the one-size-fits-all path, Grayling says, can never wholly satisfy anyone without self-denial and self-deception. And the fact is, if you were a child and you were given a platter of options as far as life paths go? Would you have chosen the one that I outlined before? Education, job, house, marry, kids, etc. Is that the one you would have chosen? Chances are it's not. And it's not because you were a naive young kid. It's because you were more in touch with your authenticity back then. You were more in touch with what you wanted from life. You had a pulse on the fact that it wasn't the same thing as everyone else. So Grayling really encourages us to think for ourselves. In fact, this is the Socratic challenge, is to think and think for yourself your own answer to the Socratic questions of how should you lead your life? What values should you organize your life around? What things should you pursue and why? We need to come up with those answers ourselves. And the fact is that most people don't. The Oscar Wilde quote is particularly relevant here. It goes like this. Most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions. Their lives are mimicry. Their passions a quotation. You need to have your own personal life philosophy. Come up with it yourself so that your life is your own and not others. Because when you don't, your life is someone else's. You're living someone else's life philosophy. You're living someone else's life because it is not yours. Because you haven't thought about whether or not it is compatible with you. To never claim and accept the responsibility to choose your own life philosophy and what you value and your own answers to the Socratic question is to insult your own intelligence. Because you are perfectly able to choose. You are perfectly able to think for yourself how you should live. To think for yourself what life path you want to walk. And not just adopt the one that is being given to you on a silver platter by the society you are socialized into. The thing is as well that much will change as the great wheels of history turn in the way of customs, institutions, manners, moralities, and of course the way things are. To cling on to the values and morality of your times is foolish. 150 years ago, we think of how things were, we think of what they did, what their life philosophy was back then, and we think, what are they thinking? But it is guaranteed that the future generations 150 years from now will think the same thing when they look at us. The current life philosophy, made up of the prevailing social conventions, traditions, and customs of our time, they give us a false sense of security. We are not history's exception. Future generations will look at us and question a lot of our best practices. In the past, slavery was okay. Same-sex relationships were abhorred. Corporal punishment was considered best practice for disciplining your children. And women were only allowed to be homemakers. These were all aspects of society's life philosophy in different points of history in the past. And they have all changed now. We all consider them wrong. So don't give in to this false sense of security of the current way things are, because chances are they'll be proven wrong in many ways. So it's best to consider for yourself what you think, again, is the best way to live for you. So this author, Grayling, he encourages you to shake off the bonds of convention and enforced obligation, and essentially live by the beat of your own drum. This is not to say that you should ignore the fact that, society definitely does make decisions for us. We need a minimum amount of education. We need to earn a living. We even need a smartphone and a permit to build on our own property. But we have the ability to choose the rest of it. And we need to exercise that choice. And if we're just adopting the mainstream life philosophy and not creating our own and not thinking of our own, we are not choosing the rest of it. We are living unconsciously. We are not utilizing our free will. And in that way, we are living in a deterministic fashion. And we are living someone else's life. So the argument he makes, and the argument that I myself agree with, is that we need to think of our own life philosophy. Because when we are trying to uncomfortably live the philosophy of others, it makes us insufficiently aware of ourselves. We are not in touch and living in alignment with our own uniqueness. And it often makes us unwilling to make the effort to think and work at identifying the best choices for us, because we just take for granted and take it as a given what is prescribed to us by society and everyone else. This leads us to passively accept conventional outcomes as inevitabilities, hoping that they'll turn out all right for us. But do they turn out all right? Do they? You have many examples of people who have lived the mainstream life philosophy around you. By far the majority of people around you are those who have adopted and live according to the mainstream life philosophy. Has it worked out for them? Do you admire their lives? So when it comes to formulating a life philosophy, though, this is what you need to think about. You need to think about what you really believe, what your values are, but also change what your values are if you feel called to. Justify those changed values to yourself and the values that were already existing. And accordingly, think of what that prompts you to aim for. Are there any new goals that you have thanks to your new values? And the challenge to consider our own answers to the Socratic question, the challenge to consider our own life philosophy, is a recurring one. It is in response to what is learned along the way, and it is in response to where we are in our own lives. It is continuous, a continuous practice. You should also be eclectic. There are many wisdoms from different cultures, spirituality, teachings from around the place that you can choose and appropriate if you agree with them, and that can form your life philosophy. Most importantly is to justify to yourself why you have chosen what you have chosen. Because the difference between the adopted mainstream life philosophy and between someone who has chosen their life philosophy for themselves is that they have exercised their own critical thinking. They are conscious beings now, consciously living their life, consciously walking a life path of their choosing and of their own free will. This is the lesson of this book that I would like to impart you with today. See you next time.